Good evening, my dear students. Let's start the fifth lesson of our course, um, memory. Lesson number 5, memory. Actually, we have already covered 4 lessons. First one is Introduction to Psychology. And actually, in that lesson, we have discussed about what is meant by psychology, why we should study psychology as a separate course, as a separate subject, as well as we have discussed that a different scholars' contribution for the development of psychology. From the second lesson, we have discussed about the behaviorism and the defense mechanism, because we know there are 3 important parts of personality: id, ego, and superego. When there is an imbalance between id and superego, then ego will try to get some kind of action to balance the 2 different demands from id and superego. So in that scenario, ego will be used defense mechanism. As well as we have discussed about the 5 stages of psychosexual development of a person, as well as we have discussed the very 3 important parts of mind: conscious, pre-conscious, and unconscious. Likewise, we have discussed from in lesson number 1 and in lesson number 2. Basically, we have discussed the Sigmund Freud contribution, considering 3 important models. First one is structure of mind, structure of personality, and 5 stages of personal development. Then from third lesson, we discussed about environmental psychology, because we know as human beings, we are required to live in the environment, as well as when we are living in the environment, actually the environment should be support for the person, for the human being, as well as human being should take necessary action to safeguard the environment. So therefore, from environmental psychology, we have briefly discussed about the interconnection between human being and the environment, and how, especially in the workplace, what kind of environment is required, and like place identity. Then we should highlighted that the workplace should be free from stresses. So occupational stress is somewhat very influential factor which hinder the performance of the employee. So therefore, the environment where employees are in should be favorable for their performance. So therefore, we have strictly strictly noted that the environment should be free from hazard, as well as it should be conducive for the work, or for the duties, task, duties, responsibilities of a certain person. Then after we have discussed about industrial psychology, from fourth lesson, industrial psychology, we basically discuss about what kind of relationship existed in between people and their workplace. So therefore, we discussed the nature of the factories after Second World War, during the Industrial Revolution period, and how the psychology or sociology become important discipline after revolution, and now what kind of initiatives have been taken to make a better workplace for the people. So likewise, then today we are going to discuss about memory, lesson number 5. Actually, memory කියන්නේ මතකය කියලා අපි කියනවා. So this memory is a cognitive process. So I would like to recall you, my dear student. Actually, we have we define psychology as it's a scientific study of cognitive processes and human behavior. අපි කියවේ මනෝවිද්‍යාව කියන්නේ පුද්ගලයාගේ ප්‍රජානික කාර්යයන් සහ චර්යාව විද්‍යාත්මකව හැදෑරීමක් කියලා. So when the cognitive processes and behaviors are scientifically studied, then memory is a cognitive process. පුද්ගලයෙක් තුළ තියෙන මතකය කියන්නේ ප්‍රජානික කාර්යයක්. It is inside the human mind and it is not visible. So therefore, sometimes we introduce some kind of people as a person with good memory. Sometimes we introducing different people, that people without a sound memory. Oh, she cannot remember anything. Even she cannot perform her activities, or she cannot do her own activities alone, because her memory is not in a good position. But we know when during the elderly age or elderly era, So when people getting older, so their memory will be getting weak. It is obvious. It can be happen. But sometimes when we think about a school, actually in a class, when we talk about memory of the student, it is at the different level. So some students are perform well in academic as well as extracurricular activities because they have a good memory. But some students are not perform well, and even though even though teacher is teaching the same thing for the all 50 students in the class, but according to their memory, according to their short-term and long-term capacity, according to their short-term and long-term memory, their performance will be decided. So therefore, from today's lesson will be discussed what is meant by memory. Is memory can be improved? So how the memory is stored in our human mind, and what are the storage, different storages in our human mind. It can be either short term or long term. So we'll be discuss these storage in a very detailed manner. Then will be discussed how we can enhance the memory. So different types of memory will be discussed. The memory process will be discussed because today's lesson is not very lengthy. It is comprised with only 24 slides, but please pay attention for the lesson very carefully. It is a very, very important thing that we have taken into account. So expected learning outcome. So at the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain what is mean by memory, and impress the memory process. So you have to explain why memory is a process, because memory is not a single thing, because that's why I told you it's a cognitive process. Prajanika Kriyavaliya. So if it is a cognitive process, we have to discuss how it can be a process, because we know in a process there are three important aspects: input, transformation, and output. Input, transformation, and output. If it is like that, then we can call it as a process: input, transformation, and output. So the memory also, there are some kind of inputs which should be come from environment. Like let's say if teacher is teaching right now, I'm teaching to you, so it's like an input for your memory. It's an input for you. Through concentration, you can acquire the facts that I'm telling you in the class. Through concentration, අවධානය හරහා මම කියන කරුණු ඔබගේ මනසට ඔබට දාගන්න පුළුවන්. But concentration is needed to transform environmental stimuli to memory. It's really required. Okay, so therefore memory is a process, so therefore input is required. So therefore input come from the environment as it can come as a stimuli. Then after we have to transform it. After concentration, when it go for short term, then it should be sent to the long term. So I'll be discuss all the steps of this process in a detailed manner, because you know how this process is happening inside your human mind, as well as how we can transform fact from short term to long term memory, how we can transform the information which acquire from different senses, because we know even though I'm teaching, you can acquire those facts through your senses. Okay, through your eyes, through your ears. Then but as well through your senses, through concentration, using your senses, through your concentration, you can acquire, you can send that effects to your short-term memory. So I'll be discuss. Then analyze memory types. Okay, there are a few memory types. Discuss memory enhancement. So, and finally, we'll be discuss the memory enhancement techniques. Okay. So basically, this is the roadmap of today's lesson. So sometime today's lesson may be finished. It will be earlier, but let's try our level best to discuss all these points in a very simple and easy manner. So, my dear student, again, I will tell you, when I'm teaching in the class, so don't be a watcher. Just take a printer. I believe that when you are listening to this recording, or when you participate for this lecture, you come up with your handout, printed handout. Okay. printed handout is necessary. So keep it on your table and write down the important facts that I'm discussing in the lecture. So I strictly tell you, I have already inserted the very important facts. That means only power of the points in the slide. I did not include all the things in the slide. So therefore, in most of the time, I will tell you most of the thing outside the slides, outside the more than slides, not outside, more than the slide. So in that scenario, in that occasion, through your concentration, you have to write down all the things what I'm telling you through as words, pictures, voices. You can write down, and it is necessary because your final paper will be comprised with not only the printed letters that are in the slides, but the things what I deliver in the class too. Okay, so therefore, your active participation, your concentration is very needed. Even though you are listening to the recording, doesn't matter, my dear student, but your concentration, your active participation, that means you will be live in this learning process. It is must. Okay. Yeah, introduction. Memory is an essential to human life. Actually, why we say it's an essential, this is somewhat a very critical word for you, my dear student. Because why memory is essential? Because let's say if a person is free from memory, if the person is not having a proper memory or required memory, we'll be introduced that person as an abnormal person. අපි කියන පුද්ගලයෙකුට මතකේ නැත්නම් අපි ඒ පුද්ගලයාව සාමාන්‍ය පුද්ගලයෙක් විදිහට හඳුනන්නේ නැහැ. We are not going to introduce that person as a normal person. Okay, because we know without memory, the particular person cannot be survived as a normal human being. සාමාන්‍ය මනුස්සයෙක් විදිහට ඒ මනුස්සයට ප්‍රයත්න තහවුරු කරගන්න බෑ. Because we know when we get up early in the morning, different things we have to perform through different roles. අපේ විවිධ භූමිකා හරහා අපිට බොහෝ දේවල් තියෙනවා perform කරන්න. So as an example, in my case, when I get up early in the morning, as a mother, I have to concentrate on my kids, and I have to prepare meals, and I have to ensure whether they have taken all the necessary stuff to the school, etc. So as a wife, I should have very good memory. What I'm going to cook early in the morning for the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and how it should be cooked, and how many quantities are required to cook. Likewise, what I'm going to cook. So likewise, what are the things already inside the refrigerator, and what are not inside the refrigerator, and all these things should be in my mind. That means memory is needed. So as a wife also, I have very good memory, whether I have given the lunch for my husband, whether I want to convey some kind of very important information or messages to him regarding relatives or any other people or their parents, etc. So that memory is required. So as a lecturer, so I should ensure whether I have given you the handout before the lecture, like at least 6 hours prior to the lecture, or 1 day prior to the lecture. So whether I have provided sufficient supplementary document, or so I should ensure to start the lecture on time, and I cannot forget the lecture time, and I should clearly know at how many hours last this lecture. So likewise, memory is required. Otherwise, we cannot perform well or perform different roles as a normal human being. So we cannot be success. So memory is an essential to human life. ඔයාලට මතකේ නැත්නම් අපි මනුස්සයව සැලකන්නේ මානසික ගැටලුවක් තියෙන පුද්ගලයෙක් විදිහින්. ඒ වගේ පුද්ගලයෙක්, that type of person will not be accepted by the society as a normal human being. So people may be advised for you to admit that kind of people to different health like hospitals or medical centers, etc. Since that person will be introduced as a patient. Okay. So therefore, we cannot think about life without memory. කිසිම දෙයක් මතකය නැති ජීවිතයක් ගැන අපිට හිතන්නට බෑ. So forgetting to create many problems in human life. So sometimes the level of forgetfulness can vary from one person to another. අමතක වීමේ ප්‍රමාණය පුද්ගලයාගෙන් පුද්ගලට වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන් පුතේ. But this forgotten to create many problems. But when you forget something, it creates many problems in human life, especially in your career. So if you forget to perform the assigned tasks, duties, responsibilities on time, then what will happen? Your supervisor or your boss will blame on you, and sometimes you, because of that, you may lose your promotion and increment, incentive, etc. Sometimes because of your forgotten, you may lose your best friends, your relatives, etc. Let's say if you forget to attend for a party which have been invited by your relative. So if you forget to attend, and if let's say if you are not in a position to attend for that, but you are responsible to inform that your inability prior to that occasion, like before 5 or 3 days, at least then they can invite somebody else on behalf of you. So that courtesy should be with you. So because of that, if you forget that kind of things, definitely sometimes you may lose your relatives as well, neighbors as well. You are like sometimes you are even though you will not lose your parents or your husband or your children because of your forgetting, but sometimes the trust in between those people will be ruined. ඔබට අමතක වුණොත් සමහරට ඔබට දෙමාපියෝ සහෝදර සහෝදරියෝ ඔබගේ ආදරණීය පිරිඳ ස්වාමි පුරුෂයා දරුවෝ නැති වෙන්නේ නැහැ, because since they are very loved, they will introduce you as an essential person for their life you. So in that case you will not lose them, but you may lose the trust in between you and them. ඔබ සහ ඔවුන් අතර තියෙන විශ්වාසය පළුදු වෙනවා. So it will directly affect for the interrelationship between you and others. අමතක වීම කියන දේවල් බොහෝ ගැටලු නිර්මාණය කරනවා, especially for the interpersonal relationships. So write down. Forget to create many problems in human life. Some, as an example, lose interpersonal relationships, lose trust. You may lose trust, interpersonal relationship. Suspicious can be happen. සැකය කියන දේ මතුවෙනවා අමතක වීම හරහා. Sometimes the positive attitudes towards you will be diluted. Positive attitudes towards you will be diluted. ඔබ කෙරෙහි තියෙන ධනවාදී ධනාත්මක ආකල්ප දියාරු වෙන්න පුළුවන්. So that means sometimes it may cause to create very bad impression about you and your behavior. අපි ඒ වගේ අමතක වෙන කෙනෙක් අපි ඒ පුද්ගලයාගේ හැසිරීම ගැන අපි හොඳ විදිහට හිතන්නේ නැහැ. So let's see, you may lose lot of things which are very essential for a happy life because of your forgetting. So therefore, these memories, but my dear student, please do remember, in a class, student cannot, their memory is not equal. Their level of memory may vary from one person to another. But in that scenario, teacher should take necessary action to upgrade the memory of the person by taking different techniques. Like sometimes teachers may teach students like in a narrative form, stories විදියට කියලා දෙනවා. Sometimes they will teach through pictures. Sometimes they teach different things through videos, like teledramas or films, especially religion. In our Roman Catholic, most of the teachers teach through as films, as stories in a narrative manner. So therefore, we can enhance memory. Please do remember, my dear student, we can enhance memory. But several techniques can be used in education aspect as well. But non-education activities also, memory can be enhanced. So therefore, don't believe. My parents also always forget. So therefore, it come to my blood from genes. So therefore, I am also always involved with forgotten. ඒක වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපේ අම්මට හැමතිස්සෙම අමතක වෙනවා, තාත්තට අමතක වෙනවා. ඒත් ජානවලි මට ඇවිල්ලාද කොයිද? ඒ නිසා මටත් හැමතිස්සෙම අමතක වෙනවා කියලා සාධාරණීකරණය කරන්න බෑ. Why? Because memory can be enhanced. If you wish, if your dedication is there, then automatically what will happen? You can enhance your memory. So therefore, let's try to understand what is the importance of memory and how it creates different problems in our life. Okay, what is memory? Memory is the process of storing, retaining, and recalling information. It's a process of storing, retaining, and recalling information. මතකය කියන්නේ ගබඩ තොරතුරු ගබඩා කිරීම, රඳවා තබා ගැනීම සහ නැවත ආවර්ජනය කියන තුනේ එකතුව. In storing mean ගබඩා කිරීම, retaining රඳවා තබා ගැනීම, and recalling ආවර්ජනය කියන දේ. Recalling, when you want, we should be able to recall them. So let's say when student is let's say study about history of the country, then when through different techniques that student will store that information or the information which pertain for the history in the human mind. Okay, using different techniques, like sometime in a narrative manner or sometime as a pictures. Peg method will be used. So likewise will be discussed different methods which can be used, but anyhow store through proper concentration, which the information which acquired through sensors, then through proper concentration, nicely storing in the human mind. And when it's stored, like I did in short term or long term, but it's not sufficient, it should be retained. මේ තොරතුරු අපි නිකන් ස්ටෝර් කරාට දැන් නෑ පුතේ, ඒක මතකේ රැඳෙන්න ඕන. So retaining can be happen, retaining can be done when you do rehearsal. When you do rehearsal, retain කරන එක රඳවා ගන්න පුළුවන් ඉන්නේ වරින් වර ඒ දේ එකම දේ පාඩම් කරත් විතරයි. So please do remember, please underline retaining and write down. Retaining is possible. Retaining is possible when always do rehearsal. When always study the same information. When always study the same information. And recalling mean if you properly retaining, if you storing is possible, but if you have take necessary action to retain the information which occurred in your mind through reading or studying time to time, then recalling is possible. Okay, recalling is possible. So if the information is not properly retaining in your human mind, recalling won't be happen. අපි හැමතිස්සෙම පාඩම් කර කර මතකයේ අලුත් කරන දේ තමයි පුතේ ඕනම වෙලාවක ඉක්මනට අපිට ආවර්ජනය කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ. So therefore memory is a process of three important tasks. So when in an examination, if somebody asks what are the three important aspects of the memory process, then they are storing, retaining and recalling. Okay. And memory is sharing of past information, and it should be maintained and it should be retrospective. It is a collaborative process. Simply why it's a collaborative process? Because storing, retaining, recalling are interconnected each other. In simple term, memory is the storage of information. Maintenance, another word for maintenance is retaining, and utilizing of them. Another word for utilizing is recalling of. In here, them mean information. In here, them mean information when needed. So if you have very good memory, it indicates that you properly store information and you properly maintain in your human mind, and you are able to utilize them when it is needed. Like let's say when you go for an examination, if you properly store the facts on history or maths or science, then if you retain in your mind in a proper manner, like time to time you have studied, and you have prepared your own short note, then retaining was there. Then when you go for the examination, you can nicely recall the information when you receive the paper. Okay, so therefore retaining is, so most of the students, they are very weak in retaining. Why? Because even though teacher is taught different facts, but they are not study those facts time to time, then the heap of information which should be study will be double day by day. Then automatically what will happen when the examination comes, the recalling is impossible. So that's why we are always asking you to study time to time, make your own short note, discuss with your friends and listen to the recording and find some more information from the different other resources, etc. So retaining is hard. So students or most of the people are very poor in retaining. So therefore, unfortunately, what will happen? They are not in a position to recall. Okay. So memory is a process is comprised of three essential steps: encoding, that means registration of information, maintaining information and retaining information, and storing and recalling. So actually, the order of this process is uh, should be changed. First one is storing, second one is encoding, third one is recalling. So storing, then encoding mean like maintaining information. Then recalling mean retrieved. Another word we can use for this is retrieved. Retrieve information when needed. When needed. Okay. So actually we have discussed about these three simply. So encoding is comprised. So let's see what is meant by encoding. Actually, when we talk about this process, like encoding is like um, information gathering. It's like encoding mean like information gathering and information learning and connecting information. So like let's say when you come for this lecture, what you do is through concentration you gather information. Right? I am giving you handout. Then through the lecture you gather information through my verbal facts. So information gathering. So gathering is not sufficient. Gathering is not sufficient. You have to learn them. That's why self study is required. That's why I'm telling you, learning is you have to ensure whether the facts that I'm sharing in the class is true and accurate. මම හැමතිස්සෙම කියන පොතේ ඉගෙනීම කියලා කියන්නේ මම ක්ලාස් එකේ කියන දේවල් 100ක් හරි කියලා විශ්වාස කිරීම නෙමෙයි. ඒ දේවල් හරිද කියලා ඔයගොල්ලෝ වෙනත් sources වලින් books කියවලා තහවුරු කර ගැනීම කියලා. So therefore information gathering can be done since I am providing you a handout. Since I am giving since I am doing the lecture as a recording. So information gathering is possible. But information learning is hard. It's a self decision. You have to learn information. You have to ensure whether the facts shared by the particular lecture is true and accurate. And you have to ensure, you have to cross-check with other sources whether the facts that she or he has shared is true and accurate. So learning is hard. That's why I am asking you to prepare your own short note, discuss with your friends, and listen other YouTube videos relevant for this lesson, etc. So learning is a very, very important part. And then after learning, you should be able to connect the information. So you have to you should be able to connect information. So with the very good example in the prior slide, that's why I changed storing first, not encoding, because in your handout, it may be encoding first, storing second, third recalling. So I change. I know because storing should be first and encoding should be second. So therefore, since I can connect the information, because initially we identified there are three important parts of the process. Then after I can connect these three stages according to the hierarchical order. I know the storing should be happen before encoding. I should know the encoding should be happen before recalling. So therefore, memory mean once you have gathered information, once you have learned, self-learning or group learning happened, then after you should be able to nicely connect the information. So most of the students are failed from these two. So when they fail from the examination, what they do is they point out their fingers to the lecturers and other people and tell that the paper is so hard. Why? Because they did not answer the paper well, because their memory is not in a good position, because they did not properly learn information. Therefore, they could not be able to connect the information that they have gathered properly. එනිසා අපි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට දරුවෝ විභාගේ ෆේල් වුණාම ලකුණු අඩනම ග්‍රේඩ් එක අඩනම කෙලින්ම දෝෂාරෝපණය කරන්නේ ගුරුවරුන්ට. හරිද? පේපර්ස් බලපු ගුරුවරුන්ට. මොකද හැබැයි ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ පාර්ට් එක ඒගොල්ලෝ කරලා නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලෝ තොරතුරු ඉගෙනගෙන නැහැ. තොරතුරු ඒ නිසාම කනෙක්ට් කරගන්න තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. So therefore in the examination paper there is no reason for me to give marks. මට නම් කවුරුත් එම චෝදනා කරන්නේ නැහැ. චෝදනා කරන්නත් එපා. Because I'm very strict in paper marking, but I'm very because strict mean like not a very tough lecturer, but there is a quality of an answer. Since I have taught you well, so you are required to answer by providing a very correct or a sufficient answer for the given question. So therefore, information learning and connecting information should be come from student end. Information gathering also should come from student end, but lecturer can facilitate for information gathering. But fortunately, since I am doing the exam focus question, my dear student, I am giving you a good support for information learning and connecting information as well. Why? Because after the lecture, again, I am discussing the points that I have discussed in the lecture through this exam focus question. So therefore, encoding is comprised with three important sub-activities: information gathering, information learning, and connecting information. So this stage is known as registering information in the human mind. It's like registering information in the human mind. So most of the students are not properly registered the information in the human mind. Why? Because they are not properly learn information and they are not properly connecting information. Write down. You put a star mark and write down. Most of the people are very poor in registering information in the human mind as even though they gathered information from different sources, even though they gathered information from different sources, information learning and connecting information learning is not properly done. Therefore, they will be failed in connecting information. They will be failed in connecting information. Finally, they will be ended up with poor memory. Okay. There are three ways to register information, because we know when we talk about registering information under encoding, like basically there are three ways to register information. So very good example is like, let's take our lecture. So visual encoding, like you can register information about the lesson, the facts of this lesson through visual encoding. Like visually, right now I am sharing the slides with you. And after a few minutes, I'll be showing some kind of videos to you. So visual encoding, drushya aketa kerane. Through visually, you can register information in your mind. As simply you can tell, it's like images. Another word for this is images. As images. Images you can, visually you can say, you can see. Then auditory encoding means like as sounds. In a sound manner. Sounds. As sounds, you can, like now, because of my voice, you can hear my voice. So therefore, what you can do is, you can, through this, the sounds also help you to register the information in your memory. Then semantic encoding, like it's a meaning. So you can register information after you got the meaning to your blood. ඔබට තොරතුරු ඔබගේ මනස තුල ලියාපදිංචි කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඔබ ඒ තොරතුරු වල තේරුම ඔබගේ මනසට එකතුරතු තික්. So therefore you can add, once you understood the meaning of the facts, then it will cause through that meaning you can register those information. Okay, so therefore when you know the meaning of the facts, you can nicely connect the information. So therefore semantic encoding will facilitate for you to connect the information. අපි කියනවා මෙතන අපි කියනවා දෘශ්‍ය, මෙතන ශබ්ද, මෙතන අපි කියනවා අර්ථාකේතකරණය කියලා. ඒ ශබ්දාර්ථාකේතකරණය කියලාත් කියනවා. Semantic encoding is like අපි කියන ශබ්දාර්ථාකේතකරණය. Write down subtopic visual encoding. Visual encoding. Visual encoding. Visual encoding is registering information as pictures, diagrams, and charts, etc. Example, right now in this lecture, through slides, you registering information can be done, because you know the slides come as images here. Then auditory encoding. As noise or voice, information can be registered as noise or voice. Information can be registered in the human mind. Example, lecturer's voice. Sometimes it may be a noise for you, but anyhow, we can tell lecturer's voice in the lecture will help you to register information. Sometimes some lecturers speak very slowly, not like me. Some lecturers, their sound is very, very low. So therefore, it's hard for you to listen, hard for you to concentrate. So sometimes if the lecturer's sound is very high, then it will cause to register information in a very easy manner. So therefore, sound also really matter for the registration purpose. Then semantic encoding, subtopic semantic encoding. Registering information using the meaning, please underline the word called meaning, using the meaning of the verbal information, වාචික තොරතුරු අර්ථය මත තොරතුරු ලියාපදිංචි කරනවා. Using the meaning of the verbal information. So right now I am delivering the lecture. Then you can see the sound. You can listen my sound in the lecture. Then when I'm teaching, then through my verbal information, you can understand the meaning of the facts that I'm sharing with you, and it will cause to register your information. But please do remember, my dear student, visual encoding, or either it can be auditory or semantic, visual, auditory, semantic, either any type can be happen if your concentration is only there. සමහර දරුවෝ මේක මෙතන දාලා ඉවරලා කොහේ හරි වැඩක් කරගන්නවා නම් එක්ක අවධානය දෙන්නේ මෙතන හිටියත් හිත වෙන තැනක ගත මෙතන නම්, so what will happen? Information registration won't be happen. Why? Because if your concentration is properly in the lecture, then through visual, through auditory, through semantic, you can register your information. So one time attempt then effort. ඊට පස්සේ ළමයි මොකද කරන්නේ? ලෙක්චර් එකට එන්නෙත් නැහැ. ඊට පස්සේ ලෙක්චර් එකෙන් පස්සේ රෙකෝඩින් එක හට අහන්නෙත් නැහැ. ඉතින් rework, unnecessary pressures will come to you because of your negligence. I believe that the students are not like this, not like our students who are in the English medium batch are not like that, but let's say. But anyhow, in these three ways, either it can be visual, auditory, or semantic. It can be like images, sound, or meaning. However, it helps to register the information. Okay, so before discussing storing information, I would like to show you a very small video. Actually, it's in your last slide as well. I included the minutes which you have to spend for this purpose. Let's see. Wait.
Once everything's perfectly organized, I'll start working on my thesis.
Grammarly will ensure you feel confident nailing your final thesis by supporting the writing journey from start to finish. Welcome to Ideation Station.
How do I write the perfect? And this lesson is on types of memory. So we're going to talk about what memory is, and we're going to talk about the different types of memory and their roles in cognition and experience in life. Let's first talk about what memory is. Memory is the faculty or ability to retain information for processing and utilization, with a subset of relevant required information becoming stored for future use. And if we were to really look at memory as a whole, memory really defines who a person is, what a person knows, understands, and can do. So who we are and what we know is based on what we remember.
So basically, it's somewhat a very, very important point that you have taken into account. So basically, memory defines who a person is, what a person knows and understands and can do. It is somewhat a very, very important sentence. Please write down that sentence, my dear student. So according to the memory of the person, or the level of the memory of the person, we can define who a person is. Whether he is a responsible person, whether he can perform his career better. So define person. හොඳට මතකයේ තියෙන මේ පුද්ගලයාව නිර්වචනය කරන්න පුළුවන්. හඳුන ගන්න පුළුවන් whether he is a good or bad. Then what a person knows. So according to the memory, when he or she is retrieving that information, we can basically know who is this person. What is the level of capacity of the memory of this person, whether the person is talented, whether the person is average performer or a weak performer. So likewise, basically we can know what he knows and understand and can do. We can understand according to the memory of the person what he or she can do or can't do. So therefore, see how memory explain or define a person simply. It is not only the one criteria, but it's a main criteria which can be define a person. It's a level of memory.
So what we're going to talk about in this lesson is the following types of memory. The first one is sensory memory.
Yeah, actually, please listen. So next will we discuss the type of memory. So please listen to this video, then we'll be discussed.
Sensory memory is an initial sensory experience of the world, and it has a very limited duration. We're going to then move on to short-term memory, which has a short duration and a very small storage capacity. And we get more in detail as to what working memory is. And then we're going to look at long-term memory. Long-term memory has long-term storage, and it has a very large.
Okay. So basically, according to the types of memory, there are three types of memory: sensory, short-term, and long-term. In your slide, it is the next slide. So sensory memory is like, as I told you, you are through your senses, through your eyes, through your ears, you will be captured different information, initial sensory experience of the world, actually very limited duration, like very small. Okay, so through sensory memory, initial sensory experience of the world, very limited duration. So short-term memory. So when we talk about short-term memory, like very limited duration, will be discussed the number of the duration which lasts in the sensory memory. Like it can be, will be discussed like in sensory memory, like it is less than 1 minute. Not 1 minute, 1 second. So information retained in the sensory memory, like less than not 1 minute, 1 second. So short-term memory, it's also very small storage, short duration. Why? Because it lasts like a maximum 1 minute. See, but long-term memory is very, very critical. It's a long-term storage, very large storage capacity. So as a human being, we should always take necessary action to send all the information which are necessary to recall again to the long-term memory. අපිට recall කරන්න අවශ්‍ය හැම තොරතුරක්ම මුත්‍ය අපි යවන්නේ long term memory එකට. Because sensory memory and short term memory both have very short duration and very small storage capacity in both sensory and short term. So even though through concentration we can shift information from sensory memory to short term memory, but through rehearsal we can send it to short term to long term memory. But will be discussed. But right now just try to get an idea what are the type of memory and the nature of the duration, the information last in these 3 type of memory, and the storage capacity also very limited, very small, but very large in long-term memory. So actually when in this slide, you can basically understand 3 type of memory: sensory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. And you can differentiate these 3 memory in terms of duration. Sensory very limited, short-term short duration, but long-term like it's long-term duration. It's a long duration. But when we talk about the storage capacity, sensory memory is very limited. Short-term memory is somewhat large than the sensory, but even though it's very small storage capacity, but long-term memory, very large storage capacity. So therefore, most of the information, lot of information can be stored in long-term memory. So let's try to discuss, let's try to understand how we can send short-term to long-term memory. Basically from sensor to short-term can be shifted through concentration, but you can recall information through rehearsal always. But anyhow, the shift from short term to long term should be happen, and retrieval or a recalling can be happen when rehearsal is happening only. අපිට මේ දීර්ඝ කාල මතකයේ තියෙන තොරතුරු ආවර්ජනය කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන පුතේ අපි සැරේ සැරේ ඒ දේවල් රිහර්සල් කරලා ප්‍රැක්ටිස් කරලා ස්ටඩි කරොතින් විතරයි. That's why we are telling you 1000 times study well and do your own work well, and should make short notes and discuss with your friends, listen recording, etc.
Storage capacity. In long-term memory.
So therefore, don't watch these videos, okay? Take the important facts sharing in these videos and write down in your handout.
Memory gets split up into 2 types of memory: explicit memory and implicit memory. We're going to talk about each of those in more detail later on in this lesson. Let's first talk about sensory memory.
Because under long-term memory, there are 2 types of memory, like explicit and implicit, will be discussed one by one.
Sensory memory is essentially the original form of sensory information that is very briefly retained. So if we were to look at an object, for instance, so there is essentially a very brief original form of that information of that object that we're seeing. So an example is when light is moved around very quickly. So if someone has a light stick and they move it around very quickly, we see that it looks continuous, although it is not. And the continuity of that light that we see is due to that very brief retention of sensory information. Now, this retention is very brief.
Fraction of second. තප්පරයකම පුංචි කොටසක තමයි රැඳෙන්නේ කියලා කියනවා. So look at the duration. Duration is fraction of second because in the sensory memory, information retained like in a fraction of second.
Lasts only a fraction of a second. So perhaps not all sensory information is attended to, but the sensory information that is attended to can be brought into conscious awareness and utilized for a variety of processes and or stored for later use. So it can be brought in to be utilized in short-term memory or working memory. And then furthermore, it may be stored for long-term use in our long-term memory.
Wait, what is this? Let's try to skip it.
Now let's move on to short-term memory or working memory. So short-term or working memory is memory that is temporarily stored and actively utilized. So this memory is going to be readily accessible.
In a short-term memory, we store information in a temporary manner.
Oftentimes, the memory is only going to last for 20 to 30 seconds, especially if
it lasts only 20 to 30 seconds.
It's unrehearsed. So, for instance, if you have a string of digits in your mind, if you were to see it and think about it, and then don't think about it, that memory oftentimes may last up to 20 to 30 seconds, unless you were to rehearse those numbers over and over again in your mind. So that is the duration of short-term memory. If you were to remember it later and bring it to conscious awareness, say hours later, then we would consider that to be in long-term memory. So this is what we would call short-term memory. It lasts only 20 to 30 seconds. Oftentimes, this short-term memory system is going to be actively utilized. It's utilized for a variety of processes, problem solving, executive functioning. And because the short-term memory is actively utilized, we call it working memory. And the working memory storage has a particular capacity. Most times it's going to be anywhere from 5 to 9 items. So this is going to be average working memory storage capacity for an average person. So it's 5 to 9 items, units, or slots in your memory. So a way to actually think about this is that if you were to have a set of digits, a set of random digits in your mind, you can perhaps remember 5 of them or even up to 9 of them. After that, it's very difficult to retain and remember correctly. But if
actually this short-term memory, like working memory, its storage capacity is 5 to 9 items or unit or slot, because we know when we remember a telephone number, we do chunky, because we cannot exactly remember all the numbers together. But let's say when I'm telling my mobile number 779 410 360, I'm chunking then these digits, not 779 410 360, like these 10 digits to different like 4 chunks, not 779 410 360. So like five chunks are there. So likewise, this working memory storage capacity 5 to 9 items in those slots, that means chunking happen.
There is a particular set of numbers, for instance, 1, 2, 3, 6, 5, 4. If you were presented with those set of numbers, although it's 6 items or 6 numbers, because there is a discernible pattern to those numbers, you can actually take that information and put it into chunks and remember it. So you can remember 1, 2, 3 as one chunk and 6, 5, 4 as another chunk or a slot. So by doing that, you can actually increase the amount of information in your working memory.
Basically, this chunking we do for the managing purpose. Like that is the way we try to organize the information. So therefore, the chunking is very, very important to store information in the short-term memory, because like we cascade the entire things into different slots or different chunks. So chunking is somewhat a very, very good, very, very important thing what we can do to register information in the short-term memory.
Storage. So by chunking or putting things into groups, that can actually help you remember more. So oftentimes individuals often are going to do that. But even doing that, if you were to have 9 groups of items, that is oftentimes going to be the maximum capacity. So there's only a finite number of slots in your working memory to be used. And the way to remember the working memory storage capacity from 5 to 9 items is the mnemonic magic number 7 plus or minus 2. So 7 minus 2 would be 5, plus 2 would be 9. So 7 plus or minus 2. And I mentioned this before, but working memory, because it's actively utilized, it's important in many different functions in life. It's important in planning, it's important in learning, and it's important in problem solving. So working memory is very important for many functions in day-to-day life. Now, if certain information in short-term memory is put into long-term storage, which is oftentimes performed by the hippocampus, which consolidates this information into the long-term storage. If it's in long-term storage, we then have long-term memory. Now, there are different types of long-term memory we're going to talk about here as well. We're first going to talk about explicit memory.
Okay, so basically in the explicit memory, what we simply in the long-term memory, my dear student, like basically in the long-term memory.
So I mentioned
in the long-term memory, like it retain information more than 1 minute. So its capacity is somewhat very large. So therefore, basically, from short-term memory to long-term memory, the information is sent because based on the meaning of the information. Like let's say all the information which are in the short-term memory are not go to long-term memory. So, but please do remember, it is somewhat a very, very important facts that we have taken into account. I'll be given to write down later. So information which go from short-term memory to long-term memory, is go on based on the meaning of the information. තොරතුරු අර්ථය හොඳ නම් විතරයි පුතේ කෙටි කාල මතකෙන් දිග් කාල මතක කෙට යන්නේ. එමෙම දිග් කාල මතකේ පවත්නා තොරතුරු ප්‍රයෝජන ගලවන්නේ කෙටි කාල මතකෙන් නැවත ගැනීමෙනි කියලා කියනවා. So therefore, basically, this long-term memory is two types, like explicit memory, like simply the explicit memory, like we can tell that mean memories which can recall through an attempt. So like example for explicit memories, like subject knowledge, then information about the world, like the city of the capital city of Sri Lanka, capital city of UK, etc. So different incidents, different occasions. So all are coming under explicit memory because we can recall them, we can memorize them with an attempt. So therefore, basically, we can tell that explicit memory is like it is not it is out of person. පුද්ගලයාට අයත් නොවන තොරතුරු තමයි අපි කියන්නේ ප්‍රකාශී මතකය කියලා. Okay, we call like basically this explicit memory is it's two type, episodic memory and semantic memory. So like simply the explicit memories we can tell like loke sambandha තොරතුරු, it's out of the person. So this episodic memory, again we can divide that explicit memory into two types, episodic memory and semantic memory. I'll be given not for that later, but basically this episodic memory mean like incidents which the memory of the incidents which pertain for a person, like let's say like the first day to school, like the day you got through the scholarship exam, like the day you got to your O-level results, A-level results, the day you got married. It's all episodic memory. But semantic memories like it's this that type of that semantic memory mean it is independent, it is out of person, like බාහිර ලෝකයේ තියෙන දේවල්, like simply the knowledge that I have told you before, like subject knowledge, knowledge about the world, then world incidents, etc. So therefore this episodic memory it connects with person's life, but semantic memory is not connect with person's life, it is out of person's life, simply it involved with the world knowledge. But when we talk about implicit memory, like it's like actually implicit memory, we should not recall them with an attempt. අපි කියන්නේ ආයාසයෙන් තොරව සිදුවන සිහිකැඳවීම් කියන දේවල්, actually we can recall the information in the implicit memory without any attempt. Like let's say, if you are a very good driver, so when you sit in your driving seat, automatically the gear dala clutch pagala siduwim tika automatically වෙනවා. So no need to recall it with a great attempt, but it automatically happens. So let's say example for implicit memories, dancing or operating a machine, operating an equipment, etc. ගමනක් යද්දී මාර්ගය සම්බන්ධයෙන් මතකය, වාහන පැදවීම, all are coming under implicit memory. So implicit memory is, we can recall, but with the attempt is not needed. But for explicit memory, attempt is needed to recall it, but it can be either episodic or semantic memory. I'll be give you a short note on that. Before watching this video, that knowledge is really important.
Before there's explicit memory and implicit memory. Explicit memory is a type of long-term memory that is also known as declarative memory. So you can remember this by thinking of, you can declare this type of information. And this is memory that is consciously recalled. So you can actually bring it to conscious awareness and declare it. There are actually two types of explicit memory. There's something called semantic memory, and there is another type called episodic memory. So let's first talk about semantic memory. Semantic memory is memory regarding facts and knowledge. It's oftentimes going to be discrete pieces of information. And some examples of semantic memory include capital cities, dates, and historical facts. So if someone's able to state the capital of Poland, then that is semantic memory. That is memory of a fact. And that would be considered explicit memory. That's declarative for explicit memory. Now, with regards to episodic memory is autobiographical memory. So this type of memory is memories of personal experiences. It's associated with emotions. So a lot of times it's going to be the story of your life, and each of those memories is going to have associated emotions. Some examples of episodic memory include graduation, first time driving a car, and your wedding day. So these are some examples of episodic memory, and they're going to differ from semantic memory. And each of these has different particular systems that are utilized in the brain to remember them. And another difference between these two types of memory is that episodic memory, oftentimes you can remember the date and time of particular experiences. Whereas if you were to ask an individual when they learned the capital of a particular country, they may not be able to tell you that. So that is going to be differences in these types of memories. So that was explicit memory. Now let's talk about implicit memory. Implicit memory is non-declarative memory. And this type of memory is unconsciously recalled. So you may be wondering what I mean when I say implicit memory. So we'll see some examples here. So a type of implicit memory is procedural memory. So procedural memory is what we would call muscle memory. It's performing actions without conscious awareness. So procedural memory is a memory where an individual is able to perform the task after long periods of time. And some example,
it calls like this implicit memory is called as muscle memory, because automatically muscles are muscles already inside our body, and muscles are operating without knowing. Without knowing means performing action without conscious awareness. So therefore, that's why we call it as a muscle memory. It's able to perform the task after a long period of time. Even like let's say riding a bicycle, driving a vehicle, etc. Or dancing, singing, etc.
Riding a bicycle, driving a vehicle, playing the guitar, playing the piano, those types of skills are procedural memory. So that is the difference with implicit memory, which is something that is not really consciously recalled. It's something that you can do after you haven't done it for a very long time. You don't really think about it. Whereas with explicit memory, it's something that is consciously recalled, and you oftentimes can state that information. So those are the different types of long-term memory. If you found this lesson helpful, please like and subscribe for more lessons like this one.
Okay.
And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.
Okay. Now let's move to the lesson. Like let's say let's have a small note on this, like short-term and long-term memory. Actually, when we talk about storing information, there are two ways of storing information, either short-term memory or long-term memory. Actually, there not types of memory. There are three types of memory: sensory, short term, and long term. But in here, the storages in our human mind, there are only two storages. Gabada dekai puthe තියෙන්නේ. Either it can be short term or long term. Okay, so these are the two stores of the human mind. So in our life, so much information cannot be quantified. So therefore, when we talk about a single day, there are many more informations are like loitering or happening. So these are very important for registering information to protect people from the unquantifiable information. Even though we have exposed to different type of information type in our daily activities, but we have to select which information should be sent to short term and long term, and which there are many more information, so we have to protect people from unquantifiable information. So according to the importance of the information, we should decide whether what we are going to send to short term and what we are going to send to from short term to long term. So these ways help people to store information when there is a much more information in their hand. Actually, actually storing information either in short term or long term can be decided according to the quantity of the information in their hand. Okay, so therefore every information cannot be sent to short term and long term, but according to the importance. That's why I told you. So if the information are important, if the information are based on the meaning of the information, we will be sent that information to short term to long term. Okay, so if information is not important, we will not send that information to the long term memory. Write down. Even though a single person acquire many more information per day, even though a single person acquire many more information per day, but which information should send to long term to send short term to long term, which information should send from short term to long term will be decided based on the meaning of the information. Based on the meaning of the information. Based on the meaning of the information. Based on the meaning of okay. So then these short-term and long-term memory. So therefore, whether we are going to send that information to short-term to long-term will be decided based on the meaning of the information. If the meaning is high, meaning is important, then definitely will be sent to short-term to long-term. And not only that, let's say we'll be when we are discussing long-term memory, and we'll be discuss very important facts at that point. In the next point, like retrieve and recall. In this stage, people will recall information already stored in their mind. Like let's say in here, already stored in the long term. In their mind mean you can write down in the long-term memory. In the long-term memory. Actually, because we have, if the information is meaningful, we have already sent that information to short term to long term. So therefore, information which are in the long term only can be retrieved. Okay. So if they are important, we definitely will be retrieved. This is known as retrieving information which is already in the long-term memory. So therefore, this is known as retrieving information which are already in the long-term memory. Forgetting is the main problem in receiving. Forgetting is the main problem of not receiving, retrieving information. In here, retrieving information. Okay. So if a person is engaged with forgetting always, so what will happen? Then retrieving, there's a problem with retrieving information. Even though the information is properly stored in the long-term memory, since the particular person has not do rehearsal or not study frequently, then forgotten is happen. So retrieval is a issue with the long-term memory, because the rehearsal is not done properly. So according to psychologists, there are 3 types of retrieving information. Like, let's say, independent study, it's free recall. Then the other one is cued recall. Cued mean සිංහලෙන් කියන සංකේත ප්‍රත්‍යයනය කියලා. Then serial recall mean අනුක්‍රමික ප්‍රත්‍යයනය කියන දේ. So independent free recall or independent study is like actually all these 3 have been nicely. These are 3 types of retrieving information. So when we talk about independent or free recall, we try to retrieve information without any condition. Actually, there is no any condition, but we try to recall it. Like, let's say, we don't want to consider about the order of the, it's a free recall. It's a free, not call, free recall. So without any condition, further, we are not bothering about the pattern and the order of the information. Let's say if somebody tell something to you, actually, if the order doesn't matter, you can explain the information, either jumbling the order, then it's like free recall. But cued recall is like you try to retrieve information as symbols, etc. Let's say now, if you want to recall your class students, you can use their nicknames. You can use their nicknames. You can use your nicknames like Nikki, Mickey, Patty. Likewise, nicknames you can use those nicknames as symbols or for direction to recall that. Actually, when I was studying in my university, when I'm doing my first degree, I recall most of the information, most of the subject matters using the cued recall symbols. See, if there are many more information, what I have done is like I have used different symbols and clues to recall them. It's very effective for me. It varies from one person to another, but actually I was really benefited from that technique. Then serial recalling means information which has already in your long-term memory. If the order is really important, then when the order is really important when retrieving, then you cannot jumble the order, you can retrieve it. Like storytelling is a very good example for that. Like in a story, there is an order. You cannot jumble the order. So there are instances where you have to recall the information without jumbling the order. So therefore, the very good example for serial recall is storytelling. It's like you have to consider about the pattern of the information and you have to recall as it is you have learned. Okay. So Richard, but the difference between these two is independent study. You can recall information but anyhow, it can be independent, cued or serial, all are in the long term. But when you're recalling those information, if the order is not important when recalling, it is independent. If the order is important, then it's cued. It's a serial recall. But if you can recall the information using clues, symbols, then it's called cued recall. Yeah, model of memory. So as I bit explain on this, Richard Atkinson and Richard Striffin presented this model to explain the human memory it's a model, like environmental stimuli should be happen, something should be happen in the environment, then captured through sensors, sensory memory, through your eyes, through your ears, through your nose, through your skin. You capture those those information through your sensors. Captured information through sensors. Captured information through sensors. It's called sensory memory. Okay. Then what will happen? Then what will happen? Retrieving happen. Retrieving happen later on. Then what will happen once the information is captured after environmental stimuli, when information captured information through sensors, then it lasts only like less than 1 second. Then we have to send it to short-term memory. In the short-term memory, that particular information lasts only like 20 to 30 minutes. But please do remember, from sensory memory to short-term memory, you can send that information because of the concentration. Okay, write down. You can shift information. You can shift information in the sensory memory. You can shift information in the sensory memory to the short-term memory. To the short-term memory. To the short-term memory through concentration. Through concentration. අවධානය හරහා තමයි පුතේ ඉන්ද්‍රිය මතකයෙන් කෙටි කාල මතකයට තොරතුරු යවන්න පුළුවන්. Like let's say if in the lecture you should be alive, you should actively participate through your concentration. Then after the information you are acquiring from your eyes, from your ears, can send to your short-term memory. සමහර ළමයි මෙතන හිටියත් නිකන් වෙන ලෝකවල පාවෙනකොට ඒ ළමයි අවධානය නැති නිසා ඒගොල්ලෝ ඇස් වලින් කන් වලින් අහන දේවල් කෙටි කාල මතකයට යවන්නේ නැති කම නිසා the particular person cannot memorize, cannot capture the information properly. Then when information is in the long-term memory, through memory enhancement techniques, we can retrieve information. Please do remember, information which are in the long-term memory can be retrieved. I have told you these points 1,000 times, okay? So information which are in the short-term memory cannot be retrieved, but you can retrieve only the information which are in the long-term memory. You can retrieve information which are only the long-term memory, but through what? Through memory enhancement techniques. But when you are going to retrieve those information, please do remember, you have to send it to the long-term memory to short-term memory. Then after you can recall it. Long-term memory ke tin deval ප්‍රත්‍යනය කරන්න නැවත ආවර්ජනය කරන්න එකපාර බෑ. කෙටි කාල මතකයට දාලා ඉවරලා තමයි retrieve කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ. Okay, so therefore retrieval is possible when only the information which are only in the long-term memory. So I'll be discussing the information enhancing techniques. So yes, sensory memory. So sensory memory, it's like it holds an infinity amount of information in a short term. When many more information are in the sensory memory. But short-term memory, it is the information that exists in the immediate memory and can bring them to short-term memory. Like let's say sensory memory, you can like it's less than 1 minute, 1 second. But short-term memory, it can be like 20 to 30 seconds. In that the previous video, it has been highlighted. Through rehearsal, information in short-term memory will be maintained. Okay. Then the short-term memory is reposted to long-term memory and again will bring to short-term memory when needed. That's why I told you, sensory memory, then shift to long-term memory, then long-term memory to short-term memory to long-term memory. So when you want to recall, again you have to bring that long-term information in the long-term memory to short-term memory and then you can retrieve it. So straight away you cannot retrieve information in the long-term memory. Definitely you have to bring it to the short-term memory. It's a must requirement. Yes. Type of memory. There are 3 memory types, like sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. So memory type will determine the intensity based on the duration. So as I told you earlier, based on the duration, please refer the video. I have shown it at the initial stage of the video. Like in the sensory memory, it's like the fraction of second. But in short-term memory, like 20 to 30 seconds. But like in long-term memory, actually the capacity is very high. There is no duration. Intensity mean simply the capacity of the memory. Or simply the intensity mean තොරතුරු ධාරිතාව කියන දේ. Capacity of the memory. Like let's say the sensory memory's capacity is less than short-term memory, but short-term memory capacity is less than long-term memory. So when we compare these three, the highest intensity is in the long-term, next short-term, third sensory. Okay, when we talk about sensory memory, memory is lasting less than 1 second. There is an abundance of information, useful and not useful information is available. Okay, but when we talk about short-term memory, last maximum 1 minute. This is like it lasts only 1 minute. This is called working memory. Actually, in the video also it has been shown. Capacity of this is limited. Not much sensory, but small than long term. Capacity can be maximum 9 minutes to 5 minutes. අපිට සාමාන්‍ය 9කට වඩා මතක තියාගන්න බෑ. Like let's say in the telephone number also there are 10 digits, but that's why most of the people are chunking. For me also it's valid. Not 779410360. So I also chunked that 9 numbers into 5. But some people straight away like it, not 779410360. For me, it's really hard. What I do is when somebody asks my telephone number, I do chunk it and tell, not 779410360. So chunking is the best way to increase the capacity of the short-term memory. This is a very good point you have to take into account. But actually, it's valid for your study purpose as well. So these are the different ways that I have chunked. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is one chunk. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 chunks. But in here, 1, 2, 3. Different ways we can do chunking. But basically, chunking is involved with to increase the capacity of the short-term memory. Yeah. Then further, like let's say I have explained, like let's say the long-term memory. Basically, this yes. When we talk about long-term memory lasts more than 1 minute. Its capacity cannot be quantified, unlimited. See, it cannot be quantified, mean it's unlimited. Unlimited. And information goes from short-term to long-term according to the meaning of the information. That's I told you. It goes to short-term to long-term according to meaning of the information. If you understood the interconnection of the information correctly, you automatically set it for the long-term memory from short-term. So long-term memory can be categorized in 2 types: declarative, that means explicit memory. Actually, I have in the video it nicely explained. This explicit memory, it involved with like it required attempt to recall. ප්‍රත්‍යනය කරන්න යම්කිසි උත්සාහයක් අවශ්‍යයි. But like implicit memory, we call it as procedural memory, muscle memory. So implicit memory, actually, we don't want. We do not require attempt to recall. It automatically happens. Or driving a vehicle, not required. Not required attempt to recall. Okay, there is a difference between these two. So example for declarative or explicit memory is like historical facts or information about the world and information about the crises, etc. But it's out of person's life. මනුස්සගේ ජීවිතේ පරිබාහිර හේතු තොරතුරු. But we can tell, but basically explicit information are 2 types. Like it can be episodic memory and semantic memory. Actually, you cannot tell that explicit memory is totally out of person, because we know explicit memory there are 2 types, like episodic and semantic memory. So in the episodic memory, it talk about the very important incident of a person, like the very first day of the schooling and the marriage date, or the day we became parents. So those are the episodic episode. ජීවිතේ ජවනිකා තියෙන මතක. ඒ මතක අපි කියනවා it is also coming under explicit memory, but Semantic memory is it is independent from a person. Example for semantic memory is like the historical facts or knowledge about world, etc. So therefore, explicit memory, two types. It can be episodic and semantic. Episodic involved with the person's important events, but semantic is involved with persons, not involved with person. It's out of the person, like historical facts or information about the incidents or important occasions, etc. So episodic and memory, a memory that is related to a person's life, that is an autobiography of a person. Example is provided: graduation day, wedding day of a person. Semantic memory is a memory about the world. Moreover, this memory is independent of a person, historical facts, capital cities, dates, etc. Then procedural memory, we can call it a procedural memory, then implicit memory, or we can tell implicit memory. Then after further, we can tell muscle memory. Muscle do everything. Muscle govern person. This is related to skills. Like why we say it's muscle memory, it's related with skills. Like when we are driving a vehicle, our leg muscles, our hand muscles operate that skill. Okay, dancing, singing, operating a machine, riding a bicycle, driving a car, operating a sewing machine, all are coming under example for muscle memory. එනපොතේ ඒ කාරණා කරන්න අපිට තොරතුරු ප්‍රත්‍යනයක් අලුතෙන් මතක් කරන්න අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. ඒක automatically සිදු වෙනවා. So in the procedural memory, why we say there's a procedure. In that procedure, it automatically comes from a person since it is a skill. කුසලතාවයක් නිසා ඒ ක්‍රියාවලිය මනුස්සයා තුළ ඒ සිදුවීම හරහා අපි කියනවා ඒ මතකය අපිට ආවර්ජනය කරන්න කැඳවන්න අපිට සිහි කැඳවන්න අවශ්‍ය මේ කියන්නේ ආයාසයක් අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. නිරායාසයෙන්ම සිද්ධ වෙනවා. I mean muscle memory, implicit memory, but explicit memory is not like that. We require an attempt. අපිට උත්සාහයක් අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා ඒවා මතකයට ගන්න. ඒවා either it can be episodic or semantic. So if you have any question, we can discuss when we are discussing the exam focus question on this. So please study, Pute, it is really important. Okay, let's listen this nice video which is based on information processing model. I'll be showing it now.
At Halloween
Wait,
costumes.
I'll skip the video.
Costumes for any shape or size. We have costumes for the whole.
This week, we're going to look at learning and memory and what the information processing theory says about how we learn as humans. This will be the first of 2 weeks where learning and memory are discussed. Think about the following questions. When you need to remember something, how do you remember? When you go to the movies, how do you remember where you parked your car? What about when you're rushing out the door in the morning and you need to find your keys? How do you know where they are? Or when you come to a new environment like USC and you're being introduced to a lot of new people, how do you remember their names? How does our memory work? Before we jump into the latest and greatest model of our memory, let's take a look at this cartoon. What is the human brain being compared to here? That's right, a computer. The best model we have today to explain how our memory works is the information processing system. You'll also hear this be referred to as the information processing model, or like the title of our unit, the information processing theory. In this model, the mind is very much compared to a computer. Think about the times in the past that you've studied, all of the hours you've put in, the anxiety, the sweat, the tears, only to forget things the following semester or even the following day. How does our brain work like a computer? Think about what was said in the chapter that you read. For example, if we don't file our information well, we are not going to be able to find it. If we have too many things going on, the system will crash. So of course, the joke is about the human mind being very similar to a computer. And in a lot of ways, it really is. We do file things in our memory, but how well we file them meaning how well they're organized with the information that we previously learned, will determine how well and how quickly we're able to bring up the information when we need it. This cartoon really illustrates what we're going to be focusing on today: human memory and the information processing system. Let's take a closer look at the information processing theory. This is the theory that will be the foundation of everything that we learn in EDUC 140. According to the theory, there are three main components to the information processing system. They are short-term sensory store, working memory, and long-term memory. Let's take a closer look at these three components. The first component in the information processing model is the short-term sensory store. This is also referred to as a sensory memory or sensory register. This component is where all of the information first enters our mind, all of the sensory information that we're receiving from our environment. So what kind of input comes in? Think about your senses. Go back to kindergarten. How many senses do you have? 5, right? Unfortunately, that's not correct. Depending on the theorist that you speak to, there can be anywhere from 10 to even upwards of 20 different senses. We know the basic 5: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. So just think about all of the information that's coming in through those basic 5 senses. What are you seeing right now? Where are you sitting? Are you inside or are you outside? Are you in your dorm or the library? Are there things on your desk? Do you have books and papers spread out? Or is it just your computer in front of you? What are you hearing? Is your roommate playing music? Is your phone going off? Are there other people in the library who are talking? Or do you have music of your own on in the background? What about smell? Is someone eating pizza near you? Touch. How does your chair feel? We can actually take our sense of touch and break it down into a few different parts. We can feel things that are hot, things that are cold. We feel pressure. We feel pain. We also have a sense of motion. Are you possibly listening to this as you're driving in a car or walking across campus? We also have a vestibular sense, or a sense of balance. This lets us know that we are right side up and not going to fall down. So what happens to all the information in the short-term sensory store? One of two things can occur. It can either move into the working memory, or it gets lost forever. This component is often referred to as a store or a register because it's not technically memory. The information moves through the short-term sensory store so quickly that it doesn't even register into our consciousness. In fact, if information is not moved into our working memory in a half a second to 3 seconds, it gets lost forever. Think about the last time you were walking through campus and all of the people, the buildings, the objects, the flags, the scenery, the plants, the trees, the maybe even birds or people on bikes that you were encountering. All of the conversations that you heard, people either talking loudly or whispering, maybe someone was singing or you were hearing music of your own. All of these things were coming in through your short-term sensory store. Most of these things were lost very quickly, although they all did register for a brief flash in the information processing model. Although most of the information that comes through the short-term sensory store is lost, some information does get pushed into the working memory. But how does this occur? Think about the things that you were consciously thinking about as you were walking through campus. Maybe you were listening to music of your own, or you were having a conversation with a friend. These things did enter your working memory, but how did they get there? Let's take a look at the next slide. Now pay attention. Literally, we need to pay attention in order to move things from our short-term sensory store into our working memory. What would be an example of this? First, let's go back to our little stroll across campus. You saw a lot of people, a lot of things as you were walking, but they all didn't catch your attention. Maybe somebody was walking who was wearing the same USC t-shirt that you were, or someone who you met previously at a Welcome Week event. This probably caught your attention and brought the information into your working memory, which is really our consciousness. What about when we're studying? Have you ever read a sentence, a paragraph, or a whole page, and you know you read it, but you get to the bottom of the page and you realize you have no idea what you just read? This is a working memory issue. What was happening is that you weren't paying attention. So everything was coming into your short-term sensory store, but because you might have been thinking about something else, maybe a conversation that you had just had, or you were listening to the music or thinking about how you don't like the song that's playing, because you were attending to other information. The information that you were reading in the book wasn't coming into your working memory and being processed. So what about the information that does come into our working memory? What happens to it then? Well, there are three things that can happen. First, if we don't think it's that important, or if something else more important comes in and pushes that information out, the memory will be lost. Second, if we rehearse or repeat the information, such as maybe an email address that you just received, but didn't have anywhere to write it down. If you repeat that information over and over, it will stay in our working memory for a little bit longer than normal. The third thing that can occur is that the information can go into our long-term memory. Moving information into our long-term memory is how learning actually occurs. This is information that we'll be able to retrieve at a later time. Repeating information, such as the email address that we just received, is probably not going to go into our long-term memory. We're just going to have to repeat it until we can write it down or put it into our phone or computer. Because moving information into our long-term memory is how learning occurs, this is really the gold standard of memory. This is the holy grail. This is where we want our memories to go when things are important, such as studying for a class or remembering someone's birthday. But how do we get information into our long-term memory? We'll get to that in a bit, but first, let's take a little bit closer look at working memory. Our working memory is our consciousness. Once we attend to information, we can think about it on a conscious level. Unfortunately, there's not that big of a capacity in our working memory. We can really only think about 5 to 9 different things at a time. And actually, experts nowadays really think that that number is a lot lower, probably closer to 4. So what this means is that our working memory has a very small capacity. But on top of having a small capacity, it also has a very short duration. The duration of the working memory is about 5 to 15 seconds. This means that if information is attended to and brought into our working memory, but something else doesn't occur, such as rehearsal or moving the information into long-term memory, the information will be lost. So think about that email address that you were trying to remember, but you didn't have anywhere to write it down. You can rehearse this and keep it in your working memory for a little bit longer than 5 to 15 seconds. But because our working memory has a very small capacity, you want to make sure someone doesn't come by and start talking to you while you're trying to remember and rehearse that email address. If, for example, that happens, someone comes by, asks you a question, asks you what time it is, or tries to start a whole conversation with you, what happens is the capacity is so small in our working memory that the new information coming in will actually push out the email address that you were trying to remember. And again, the memory will be lost. So looking back at the capacity of our working memory, the 7 plus or minus 2 things, the 5 to 9 things, or more like 4 things that we can hold in our working memory at one time, it kind of gives the illusion that we can multitask really well. We can pay attention to maybe 4 things, maybe even 5 to 9 things at one time, and be great multitaskers. This very common belief is actually not true. What our brains do, as opposed to multitasking, is really task switching. We can switch our focus from one thing to another, and we can hold things in our working memory for a limited amount of time. But we don't necessarily pay attention to more than one thing at a time. We just move very quickly from paying attention to one thing as opposed to another. So what does it look like when we're studying? Let's pretend that we've been studying for a few hours and we've put in a lot of effort. But in the background, we have our music on. And you're focused, you're deep in concentration, you're reading, you are bringing information into your working memory, not just your short-term sensory store. You're paying attention to that information that you're reading or that you're reviewing in your notes. But a song comes on, and you've heard the song already like 3 times today, and you don't feel like listening to it again. And so you temporarily pull your working memory away, your consciousness away from the studying to change the song. Or maybe a song that you really like comes on, and you start to sing the lyrics, or hum the tune, or you turn the volume up. And just very briefly, your working memory switches from the task at hand, the studying, to the music. What's the big deal? It's only a few seconds. right? We went right back to where we were. But unfortunately, that's not true. When you go back to the work, when you go back to your notes, when you go back to the book, what happens is you have to figure out where you left off. And this task switching, although very rapid, ultimately fatigues our executive control system, which is a very important component to our working memory. The executive control system is one of 3 components of the working memory and is very important to the way that we learn. This is where we process things consciously and we make meaning out of the information that we're attending to. The executive control system also organizes information and makes inferences about it in order to make the new information meaningful. This system also decides which information we'll attend to. It decides what's important to us and what's not, what we need to rehearse and keep for a little bit longer, or what isn't important at all, and that even though it caught our attention briefly, we can let it go to memory loss, and we don't need to process it any further. It also decides what information is going to get sent to long-term memory, because it deems it so important that we'll need to retrieve it at a later time. The executive control system is a very important component to working memory, and it's especially important to learning. But again, can be very easily fatigued when there are several things that are vying for our attention and competing for that short duration and that small capacity that our working memory has. This piece of information about the executive control system is really important to us as learners. What it means is that we need to maximize our working memory by limiting the number of distractions. For example, if we're trying to study for an exam, if we are writing a paper or preparing for a presentation or a class discussion, we need to make sure that there are not other things that are fighting for our attention as we're trying to learn and make sense out of the information that's coming in. So this means we got to do the hard stuff, shutting our phones off so that we're not getting constant email pings or text messages, studying in the library where there are less distractions, less noise, less friends coming by, knocking on our door, wanting to hang out, shutting the music off, or having music that doesn't have lyrics because language is complicated and will pull our attention away from what we're trying to learn. By maximizing the ability of our working memory, we're better able to ensure that the information that we're trying to learn is attended to, is processed meaningfully, and is organized so that when we need to retrieve it from our long-term memory, it will be available for us. Speaking of long-term memory, let's take a look at that next. Long-term memory, the promised land, the gold standard of memory. This is where learning occurs, and this is where we want the information that we're trying to learn to end up. But in order for it to be useful to us, we need to be able to bring it back into our working memory when we need it, either on a test or in a class discussion or when we're presenting. So how do we ensure that? What we need to do is we need to encode the information by making sense out of it based on what we know in our own personal experiences or previous knowledge. We need to organize the information, which means that we need to associate it with other information that we already know that will help lead us to the new information that we're learning. We need to encode it as opposed to just depositing it in the long-term memory. A good example or a good metaphor for this is think about when you were a kid and you really wanted to go play outside and your mom told you that you had to clean your room before you went outside. What did you do? Probably like most kids, you either took everything and threw it under your bed or stuffed it all in your closet. Now this is great because you got to run outside and play and your task was finished. Unfortunately, when you had to go back and find your toys, maybe you wanted to play with your G.I. Joe or your Barbie or whatnot, you had no idea where it was. You knew it was probably under your bed or in the closet, but to actually find the toy, you would probably have to take everything out of the closet or pull everything out from under your bed in order to find what you're looking for. Now think about this. If you're studying information and you're cramming everything in instead of trying to take the time to organize it well and make sense of it based on your previous knowledge, what will happen is that the information will just get stuffed in your long-term memory, like the toys got stuffed in the closet. And this means that the information is just being deposited. What happens in the next day when you're doing your presentation or you are taking the test is that you're not going to be able to retrieve the information. You're not going to be able to pull the information from your long-term memory and pull it into your working memory so that you can write it down or articulate it. And this is where the problem lies. When we study for hours or we study the whole day, the day before a test, but we just can't seem to remember what it is that we studied. One of two things occurred. Either the information just got crammed in and stored into our long-term memory, and we're not able to retrieve it, or it never got put into our long-term memory at all, and the memory was actually lost. It just stayed in our working memory because we were repeating it, trying to memorize it. But instead of going into our long-term memory, it was just simply lost when we stopped thinking about it. So this begs the question, did we really forget what we learned, or did we not learn it in the first place? So how do we maximize our working memory and ultimately support our long-term memory and being able to encode and retrieve information effectively? Well,
it is our next problem. It is our next issue. Let's say we'll be discussing the last topic of this lesson is how we can increase the memory of the long-term memory. So memory enhancement technique will be discussed. So therefore, we'll be discuss how we can enhance the memory, how we can enhance the information in the long-term memory, how we can recall it easily without any disturb. So let's see.
we have to make sense of it. We have to organize it for ourselves, and we have to take the burden off of our working memory in trying to remember a lot of unnecessary things. So you see here that we have a matrix. We have a representation or a graphic organizer that will help you remember the things that we just went over. There's a comparison of the three main components of the information processing system: the short-term sensory store, the working memory, the long-term memory. And we're comparing the capacity and the duration of these three components. So here we've taken a lot of information that we had over the previous 3 slides, and we've brought it all onto one slide so that we can compare and contrast it and make sense out of it, see the relationships between these 3 components, and how the capacity and duration of each varies. A few final questions to help you reflect on what you've learned in this lecture. What are you choosing to pay attention to? Are you maximizing your working memory capacity? What in your environment is distracting you? And what information are you able to retrieve after studying or practicing?
Okay, that's all what we have discussed under this process. But please remember, my dear student, let's move to the handout again. So the last topic we have to cover is like memory enhancement techniques. So in that video, it nicely explained that memory can be enhanced. So we will be discussing, since we have only 6 slides to discuss, we'll be discussing the memory enhancement techniques after small break. So let's take a small break, and I'll meet you after 5 minutes. let's start. Actually, memory enhancement. Like the final topic of today's lesson, memory enhancement. Actually, memory naturally fades because we know that even though many more information will be come to the long-term memory from short-term memory, but memory naturally fades. Fades mean that memory will be will be diluted. But therefore, the information in the memory is constantly should be updated. That's why I told you through rehearsal, we have to update it time to time. Through different kind of techniques, we have to be adapted to not to allow them to fade, but to constantly update those information time to time is required, because otherwise we cannot retrieve them when it is necessary. So memory is the oldest of the all mental skills. Honestly, මානසික කුසලතාවලින් පරණම කුසලතාවය තමයි පුතේ මතකය කියලා කියන්නේ. So memory, please to remember, memory is a main cognitive process. It all skills begin with memory. So like it can be dancing, it can be singing, or interpersonal relationship, or a technical skills, or a computer literacy, anything, any skill in this world which pertain for a human being start with memory. If the memory is not there, nobody can nobody can demonstrate any type of skill, either it can be soft or a hard skill. Okay, and whether there is no memory, we have no knowledge and art. Okay, so art is there because of memory, knowledge is there because of memory. Not only that, every occupation on this earth, either it can be medicine, engineering, management, all these careers, all these occupations are existing because of the memory which pertain for the relevant field. The more you use memory tricks, the more you study. So memory tricks are really important for what? To constantly update the memory. Write down memory tricks. Memory tricks are needed for constantly update the information, which to avoid fade, and it goes for CAUSC, it goes for less forgetfulness. Actually, forgetfulness cannot be 100% avoided, but it can be less if we are using different memory tricks. So we'll be discussing different memory tricks. So some books say these memory tricks as mnemonics. So to enhance memory, the strategies are used as follows. So there are different strategies, tricks are available in this world which can be used as memory tricks to constantly update the information in the long-term memory. So first one is lossy method, peg method, likewise different methods are there. So I'll tell you what is meant by lossy method or a peg method, etc. So simply, actually, I am not give a short note on each and every. Okay, we'll give a small short note on each and every aspect. Then you know what is on it. So simply, the lossy method or a peg system means like it's a very old method, but it use like visual pictures are using. Which visual pictures are constructing from mind for memory enhancement. So simply it's that means from mind construct visual pictures. So likewise it's like simply that it's like visual pictures of the information are constructing through the from mentally we try to construct visual pictures of the information. Write down in front of lossy method. When mind constructs, CONTRUCTS. When mind constructs visual pictures pertain for the information It is lossy method. This method is known as PEG system. This method is known as PEG system. Like most of the school students, are using mind maps, on their lessons. එන විදිහට බිත්තිවල ළමයි පුංචි short notes හදලා එන ආධාරයෙන් බිත්තිවල සවි කරන්නේ. Memory shorts like a mind maps, the entire summary of the lesson they are drawing, like visual picture is drawing like it's a mind map, and it is pasted using the pegs like nails and pasted on the wall. So it's a one method you can use to memory enhancement. Second one is like information is organized hierarchy. So according to the importance of the data, what you do is like you try to order the information in a hierarchical manner. Like from highest to lowest, this hierarchy is already constructed. The very good example is flowcharts. Like let's say when we are teaching about the environment, like in management, organizational environment, as a flowchart, you can show the hierarchy, like business environment can be cascaded in two parts, internal and external. External further can be cascaded as macro and the micro environment. So likewise, it's like a flowchart, it's like a hierarchy. So it's a good it's a very good technique that you can be used when there is a hierarchy in the data. Okay, right, done under organization strategy. When there is a hierarchy in the information, organization strategy can be used. Example, classification of the business environment. Like business environment, you can draw as a flowchart, business environment, then two branches, internal, external. Further external can be cascaded as micro and macro. Then first letter method, like organizational, like let's say when like using like first letter of a sentence or a phrase of information, like you can be used. You can use this first letter method. Very good example is SMART, because in management we are telling that business objective should be SMART. SMART means S means specific in here. S means the specific. S means specific, M mean measurable, A mean attainable, R mean realistic, T mean time frame. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time frame. So actually we cannot remember all specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time frame, but we take only the first letter of that say word and try to make a word called SMART. Then we know organization objective should be SMART. Okay, first letter methods, like it's the first letter of the phrase or a word or a sentence. Then narrative technique. So narrative technique also, like you will try to recall, try to enhance your memory you try to keep in your mind, in your long-term mind, as a story. Like the very good example is when I was teaching the industrial psychology. Actually, when I told that industrial psychology as a story in a narrative manner, because since it's somewhat a very boring topic for most of the students, like starting from Second World War, then the nature of the Industrial Revolution, the nature of the factories, and the different scholars' contribution, I have explained as a story with a time passage. So please listen to that recording. Industrial psychology, that lesson number 4, I taught like a using narrative technique. So I believe that narrative technique is somewhat very important when there is a story in the information. Okay. Narrative technique. This method is more effective. This method is more effective when the information is flow, as a story. When the information is flow as a story. Then knowledge of results. Knowledge of results mean like simply you can write down in front of it through feedback. So let's say now that technique we are using time to time even when we are in childhood, like අපි අම්මලට කියන්නේ අපෙන් පාඩම් ගන්න කියලා. අම්මට කියන අපෙන් ප්‍රශ්න අහන්න කියලා අපි උත්තර දෙනවා. ඒකට අම්මා කියනවා නෑ ඒක වැරදි ඒක මෙහෙම වෙන්න ඕනේ කියලා. අම්මා පොත දිහා බලන් කිව්වම through the feedback we try to enhance our memory. So knowledge of results is like so we try to test so write down in front of knowledge of results, we try to test the extent of knowledge, try to test the extent of acquiring knowledge, try to test the extent of acquiring knowledge through feedback. We ask an external person to check our memory, by asking question, and through his or her feedback, we try to enhance our memory. Through his or her feedback, we try to enhance our memory. Very good example. Ask our parents to ask question from us on science. Then recitation, that one is no need to explain because everybody is recite time to time, because we know like after studying a lesson, everybody will try to recite. Somebody is most of the people are walking here and there and try to recite. So recitation is somewhat a very, very good technique that we can use to enhance our memory. Like I have seen that some people are reading books or studying books and then they close the book and try to recite it. Okay, so by heart, it's recitation. So recitation is happen. Some people, what they do is they try to recite. They try to recitate what they studied by writing it on a whiteboard or a blackboard. So that is the way they recite. So some people recite by words, some people recite as letters on the whiteboard or a blackboard. So it can be happen. Then rehearsal. So rehearsal mean rehearsal cannot be done alone. Okay. So simply rehearsal mean so the rehearsal it cannot be done alone. Mean it does not mean that you require another person for this, but rehearsal when we do rehearsal time to time we have to relate new information time to time. It is required. Otherwise, rehearsal won't be effective. So write down. When do more rehearsal, memory will be enhanced more and more. When using this technique, people should use, people try to relate. So people try to add. When use this technique, people try to people should try to add more and more information. People should add more and more new information, more and more new information to the existing knowledge. අලුත් තොරතුරු කොහෙන් හරි හොය දවස ගානේ එකතු කරගෙන රිහර්සල් කරන වාරයක් පාසා. Then your memory will be enhanced. Next one is selection. So in the selection, what we try to do is we try to select only the important facts, and then we try to select and then we try to focus on only that aspect. So actually selection can be done when there is an unlimited discretion to memorize. But let's say in my paper, actually you cannot select, you can select question, but you cannot ignore like psychology, all psychology question, all sociology question, all counseling question. You cannot do like that, because mainly I have cascaded the entire paper into 3 parts: psychology, sociology, and counseling. So you are required to select at least 1 question from each part, and you are required to answer only 5 out of given 7. So therefore, in that case, you have select, but there is no 100% freedom for you to select. But if you can select as you wish, then in order to enhance your memory, you can select what you want to study only, and then you can study more and more to enhance your knowledge. Write down under selection. In this method, we select only important and required facts. Only important and required facts. Important, and underline important and required. Please underline 2 words: important and required facts, and study them more and more. If there are many more information, if there are many more both necessary and unnecessary information, if there are many more both necessary and unnecessary question, you can select only required and important to enhance your memory. Only required and important information to enhance your memory. To enhance your memory. Then whole versus part learning. So whole versus part learning mean you can study the entire lesson at once, or you can chunk the lesson like small parts, and then you can study. So the very good example, right now we have covered 5 lessons. So one student can study all 5 lessons one day, but if not, he or she can decide, I'll study only the first lesson on first day, second lesson on second day, so third lesson on third day. Likewise, you can part learning also possible, and whole versus possible. But please to remember, whole is possible when there are only very few information you have to study. But if there are many more information, it's better to go with part learning. Write down whole versus part learning. In this method, you can study. In this method, you can study the entire lesson at once. The entire lesson at once. Or study a small part, or study a small part, or study a small part of the lesson. When the lesson is short, whole is possible. Whole means WHOLE. Samaste කියනවා. When the lesson is short, whole is possible. But when the lesson is long, better to go with part learning. Better to go with part learning to enhance your memory. To enhance your memory. Then serial positioning mean mind mapping. In here, serial position mean what we do is like serial position mean like it's a very good example for mind mapping. Like simply, it's like the entire information we cascade into different sections with different sections, and then after please type on the type in the internet mind mapping, and you can understand how this mind mapping happens. So it's like it's a serial positioning of the information, and it's like a small story. Like we try to get the entire lesson on into one page. So overlearning can be understand. Overlearning mean we try to learn always as much as we can. Overlearning, write down. Try to learn information as much as we can. සමහර අය එකම දේ 10 පාරක 20 පාරක විතර පාඩම් කරනවා කියන්නේ it's like overlearning. It's a good memory enhancing technique. Then spaced practice mean it's also a very good thing. I have practiced. Sometimes you may have practiced. I have seen some students when the examination is very close, they put their legs into the water basins and continuously study. So it's not good. It's not good practice. It's not good for health, my dear students. So when they engage with overlearning or when they continuously learn, it's better to get a space practice. Sometimes once you slept and when you get up early in the morning, you can remember what you have studied in the last night. පාඩම් කරද්දී අනේ කිසි දෙයක් වලට එන්නේ නැහැ නේ කියලා කිව්වට නිින්දක් කරගෙන හොඳ විරාමයක් ගත්තට පස්සේ then again you can nicely recall the things what you have studied in the last night. Okay, so that's why, my dear students, even though in the lecture also we try to give a small break for you. So because in the research it has been shown that for every 20 minutes we require a small break, because people cannot concentrate like continuously the maximum time according to research is 40 minutes. That's why in the school also there is a one period is limited to only 35-40 minutes, because it has empirically proven that that students or people require a small break, because if they continuously learn, it is badly damage their memory. So there are a very good example for space practice is down in a school, one period limit to 40 minutes and give a break. And example of space practice is in a school, one period is limit to 40 minutes, 35 to 40 minutes, and then give a break, and start a new lesson. Please write down under space practice. Better to have a small break after each 40 minutes. After each 40 minutes to enhance your memory. Then sleep. Sleep also very good. It's then when I tell this is a memory enhancement technique, you may be highly delighted, because you know that sleep also required. Sufficient sleep is required for the memory enhancement. That's why we are strictly advising our university students during the examination period, don't come to the exam without sleep. It is not good, Pute. It's not good your health. Better to have a sleep. In his sleep mean like having a sleep like 1 hour, 2 hour. It's not sufficient. At least 8 hours required for a healthy wake up. So therefore, sleep also a very good memory enhancement technique which can be used. Okay. Next one is last 2 slides. The remaining is SQ4R method. Actually, this SQ4R method is somewhat a very, very important method. Most of the organizations, most of the people are using. S means survey. In here, survey mean like write them in front of before reading the lesson, topics, paragraph, topics, paragraph, and summary of the lesson is checking, but not reading. But not reading. Please underline but not reading. අපි කියන්නේ පොතක් බලපු ගමන්ම අපි ටග් ගාලා මේ පොත කියවන්නේ නිකන් පිටු ටික පෙරලා බලනවා නැත්නම් පිටිපස්සේ කතුවරයා කියලා ලියලා තියෙන එක දිහා බලනවා. That is a summary. පෙරවදන බලනවා. It's coming under survey. So it is also one important part of SQ4 method. Then second part is questioning. Then what you do is you try to translate topic of the lesson into question. Write down under question. Under questioning, translate topics of the lesson, translate or convert topics in the lesson to the questions. Topics in the lesson to the question. So example, in our case, what are the 3 types of memory? Because the topic was there, types of memory, then we try to convert that topic into question. What are the 3 types of memory? Sensory, short-term, long-term. So likewise, we try to convert topics of the lesson to the questions. Then for third one is read. Sorry, actually read, you can understand, you have to read. Then recite. Recite means you have to recite what you have learned. Then the relate. It is somewhat very important, my dear student. When you are reading, technical terms and the concepts you found relate with your experience and your knowledge. කියවීමේදී අලුතින් හමුවන පද සංකල්ප තම අත්දැකීම් හා දැනටමත් තමාසට දැනුමට සම්බන්ධ කිරීම කියන දේ. It's really important. Even though we have learned a lot of theoretical facts in the class, but you should be able to relate those facts, those theoretical facts to your experience or day-to-day activities in the world. Then you know, that's why, my dear student, we are giving you an assignment. Because giving an assignment is not to put you in trouble, but it's an opportunity for you to relate your knowledge, theoretical knowledge that you have acquired in the class with the practical scenario. So therefore, relate is important. Again, what you do is when you are reading a new word, when you are reading the technical terms and the concept that you have found should relate with your experience and with your knowledge, your existing knowledge. Then final one is review mean. You have to recall what you have studied. Review karna again, you have to recall what you have to retrieve what you have studied. So SQ4R method is somewhat a very, very important technique that you can be used. For this lesson also you can do for SQ4R method. Initially, you should have a very quick look on the lesson on these 24 slides, like Matrika, Cheda, Saransh, Ikmanik, Balana. Then questioning means you try to convert the topic of the lesson into question. Then you have to read, you have to recite by heart, you have to read it, recite it. Then you should relate the topics or important concept that you found in the lesson with your experience and with your knowledge. And finally, you have to review, you have to recall what you have learned. And then you can ensure at the reviewing stage, you can ensure whether you can remember or not. So the last method is PQRST method. In PQRST method, my dear student, preview. Initially preview. It's very like simply preview mean you try to get an idea about the composition and the topics of the lesson. The අපි කලින් survey එකේදී කියවන්න නැතුව නිකන් බලාගෙන යනවා කියලා topics ටික. මෙතන බලාගෙන යනවා නෙමෙයි, ඉක්මනින් කියවීමක් නෙමෙයි බලන්නේ. We would try to get an idea about the topics and the composition of the paragraph. Write down in front of preview. Try to get an idea about try to get an idea about the topics and the composition of the paragraph. Then question. Question means from your mind, you try to ask question. From your mind, you try to ask question based on every topics. Question means from manasin තමයි ප්‍රශ්න අහන්නේ. From your mind, from your mind, you try to ask question. Write down in front of question. From your mind, try to ask question on different topics of the lesson. Try to ask question from your mind on different topics of the lesson. Then read. Then self-recitation also can be done. Like you have to recite what you have learned. Then finally you can test. In the previous technique, SQ4 method, you try to review. But in here, PQRST method, you try to test. So simply when the self-recitation, read, question, review are completed, then you can test whether test your knowledge, your understanding, and like let's say you can prepare your own prepare a paper. You can answer model question papers, you can answer. Then you can test the level of your memory. You have to test. It does mean that you should not write an exam paper exactly, but you can test. You can ask somebody to ask question from you. It is also one way of testing your knowledge. Then you can do some model papers which are provided by different sources. It is also one way you can test your knowledge, etc. Okay. So that's all about memory enhancement techniques. Altogether, we have discussed 15 techniques, starting from lossy method, hierarchical method, facilitator method, narrative technique, feedback method, like feedback method, like simply we call it as there's a word for knowledge of results, but another word you can use for this is like feedback method. Then recitation, then rehearsal, selection, whole versus part learning, serial person, which is mind mapping, overlearning, space practice, sleep, etc. And finally, that two methods, important methods we discussed, like SQ4 method and PQRST method. So I'll be showing to the exam internal learning outcomes. So we explain what is mean by memory. So memory is a process. It's like sensory memory, short-term memory and long-term memory. So I explain why it is a process. It from sensory memory to long-term memory. Through concentration, it happens. Then from short-term memory to long-term memory, it goes. But rehearsal is needed to retrieve the information and analyze the memory types. 3 types: sensory, short-term, long-term, and discuss the memory enhancement. Yes, memory enhancement is possible. Under memory enhancement techniques, for 15 techniques we have been discussed. Okay, so basically what we said, the memory is all about storing, retaining, and retrieving information. So all these outcomes I have been covered, my dear student. So I believe this lesson is not hard. It's very easy lesson. Hope you understood this lesson very correctly in a very simple manner. So I'll show you a very 10 minutes video. It's very short one on this on memory enhancement techniques. Somewhat a very
Hello and welcome to Teachings and Education, Mnemonics, a teaching strategy. Help students retrieve information by using this memory technique. Why should teachers use mnemonics? Research has found mnemonics to be an efficient and effective way to store and retrieve information for individuals at all age groups. In fact, memory experts use mnemonic techniques to memorize huge amounts of information. Educators probably already know that short-term memory can hold only a limited amount of information. Whether students are in class learning through lectures, readings, discussions, or activities, information is constantly being thrown their way. Mnemonics help organize that information by grouping smaller bits of information into larger groups. More information actually gets retained using that method. Mnemonics are effective because the mind incorporates both visual side and semantic side of the brain. At its core, a mnemonic is a retrieval cue for information. As a teacher, try and provide your students with these memory cues. Students can even use these cues to remember steps in a math problem. So how do you incorporate mnemonics into your instruction? Well, let's say you're a math teacher, for example. First, identify the content of your lesson. Then you can go on the internet. There's many resources out there. You can try Pinterest, Google Images, education websites to find a bunch of different mnemonics that are already out there. Probably the most common math mnemonic would be PEMDAS. Now, let's take a look at another example from the field of science. A science teacher may want her students to be able to remember the sequence of color wavelengths that a rainbow makes. For years, teachers have used the acronym ROY-G-BIV. R is red, O is orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and V for violet. So I want to say thank you for your time. Subscribe to the channel and click the link below for resources to teaching strategies.
Okay, wait. I will show you like another last video which explain about memory enhancement technique, which is somewhat wait.
Lemon means
Wait.
Okay, batch. There are certainly ways to improve your overall ability to remember information, like getting more sleep or taking B12 vitamins, but this video is not about those tricks. It's about a type of memory tricks called mnemonics. But what is a mnemonic? Well, mnemonics are memory tricks that can help you remember long strings of information, often in a particular order. Mnemonic devices have helped people achieve phenomenal feats in the world of memory, from memorizing 40,000 digits of pi to knowing the order of a whole deck of cards. You can use them to help you remember phone numbers, create a more secure password, or maybe one day break a world record. So let's start off with chunking. If you've watched my video explaining short-term memory, you have already heard a little bit about this mnemonic device. See, short-term memory storage can only hold 5 to 9 items of information at a time, but this storage can also hold up to 4 chunks of information. The process of chunking information is explained in the name. If you're given multiple pieces of information to memorize, chunk it up into groups. Now, the groups could be based on the position in which you learn the information, similarities between the pieces of information that you need to memorize, or anything that helps you remember the information. One common example of chunking is the way that we memorize phone numbers. We split the 10 numbers into 3 chunks. First, the 3-digit area code, then the next 3 digits of the actual number, and then the last 4 digits of the number. Even if you can't normally remember 10 numbers in sequential order, you are likely to remember 3 chunks of information. Number 2 is an acronym. Now, an acronym is a simple abbreviation for a list of information that makes the phrase ordering easier to remember. So think back to your grade school days. Do you remember what PEMDAS means? Go back even further. Preschool. What does ROY-G-BIV stand for? These are examples of acronyms. See, it's not easy to remember parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction in order on a math test when you first learned it. But PEMDAS is just one word. 10 years after your last math class, PEMDAS is likely to stick. That's the beauty of an acronym. It's a single word, or maybe a phrase or a title, but it reveals a lot of information that you otherwise would not have been able to remember in the correct order. Let's move on to number 3. Some people don't remember PEMDAS. They remember it as, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. If you were taught this trick to remember how to solve math problems, you weren't using an acronym. You were using something called an acrostic to help you remember information in an important order. An acrostic is when you turn an acronym into a sentence to increase the likelihood of recalling it by giving it just a bit more meaning. Take a moment to think of some other examples of acrostics. Every good boy does fine is probably familiar to people who took an elementary school music class. My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas is also a great way to remember the order of the planets in our solar system from the sun. Usually, the sillier and the more unique that they are, the easier they are to remember. Now, this is also a great method in creating a secure password. Try to think of a quote from a movie that you like, one that would be easy to recall. For example, the famous line, "May the Force be with you" from Star Wars. Now, that sentence is likely too long or too easy to be a password, but MTFBWU is a more random password that is easy for you to remember, but more difficult for someone to guess. If you add some numbers and another favorite quote, then the strength greatly increases. Number 4 is a memory palace. Now you might be familiar with this mnemonic if you've ever watched Sherlock Holmes. Started with the ancient Greeks, a memory palace is a virtual palace in your mind where you associate items to objects in each room. See, most people start with their childhood house or a current house because they're most familiar with it. You go around to each room and you try to pick out 4 to 5 specific objects to remember. These are called your permanent items. And then once you have those memorized and you can easily recall them, for example, let's say the 3rd item in your 2nd room, and you can do that reliably, then you can move on to associating things with each permanent item. Humans have an associative memory, which is why this technique works so well for those who invest in it. If you want to remember the order of a deck of cards, you can do it pretty easily with a memory palace. You just assign each card to an object in your house using association, and then you should be able to recall it with ease. But this mnemonic takes a lot of time and practice to develop, and it shouldn't be used for things that are time sensitive. However, it is great for knowing the order of lists that are larger than 10 items. I have a whole video coming out on this soon if you're interested, so go ahead and click that subscribe button if you aren't already. Number 5 is rhyming. Another mnemonic device that seems to work well, especially when we are children, is simply rhyming things. It works great with music too, and it works well with other pieces of information. So when did Columbus sail the
In here, rhyming means, my dear student, reciting. Okay, reciting things what he or she has studied.
ocean blue? It was in 1492. Another example is the famous I before E except after C, even though there's like 20 exceptions to that rule. Lastly, we have number 6, which is rhythm and music. The last mnemonic I have for you guys is using music or a rhythmic beat. You might not know this, but Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and the ABC song, they have the same notes and rhythm. In fact, music is so great at helping people encode a
Actually, in this video, my dear student, there are another memory enhancing tricks are proposed other than the things, the 15 what I have discussed with you. So please write down them. Music, because in my lesson it was not there. So music is a good memory enhancing technique which has been acknowledged by different people. So therefore, music, like sleep, music also can be used as a memory enhancing technique.
memories. I did this cool little trick on my last vacation. I went down to Florida with my sister a couple months ago, and that's when Drake's Money in the Grave song came out. I listened to that song like 20 to 40 times while I was there, and it was stuck in my head. Then we came back from vacation, and now whenever I listen to that song, I'm always reminded of the beach and the salty, dry air. You can create your own song or reword lyrics to help you memorize something, because rhythm and musical notes work very well when encoding information in your long-term memory storage. One more thing I want to talk about in this video are famous mnemonists. If you're interested in learning more about mnemonics, I recommend that you look into the experts. These professionals are known for their extraordinary memories. One of the most famous mnemonists of all time was simply called S for decades. He's described in the book The Mind of a Mnemonist in 1968. And while the book is slightly fabricated and dramatized, it tells the fascinating story of a man who, it seemed, could remember just about anything. Further reporting and research revealed that S, whose full name was Solomon Cherevshevsky, was not a man with photographic memory. He was just a skilled mnemonist who probably had 5-fold synesthesia. If you want to learn more about him, you can check out my video on photographic memory. Many mnemonists, however, have followed in his footsteps. In the 19th
Okay, so I believe now you have an idea about what is memory enhancing techniques. Actually, mnemonics is a similar word for it, memory enhancing technique. So I believe that you have already got an idea about what is this. And basically we discuss about what is memory. Then after we discuss about the memory process, and we studied 3 memory types, and we discussed the importance of memory enhancement and 15 techniques I have been proposed other than the video stated techniques. So I am showing this video not to, again I will tell you my discipline, not for the entertainment purpose, but please watch them and try to find out more and more, try to write down the new techniques proposed in those video, plus try to find reliable sources for searching more and more techniques to color your handout. So I believe this lesson is very simple and easy for you. If you have any questions, no worries, you can ask in the when we are discussing exam focus question. So thank you very much for being with me during this 3 hours period. Have a nice day and good night, and God bless you, my dear student.